Dear Mama, come celebrate with us. Celebrate this beautiful mothering journey. Celebrate with us the powerful legacy of Black motherhood that always offers healing, is abundant in creativity, and expands liberation. We are celebrating Women's History Month by elevating the radical work of mothers raising transgender children. Today's guest, Jamarah Amani and Michelle, are Black mothers building a promised land rooted in equity and love. I'm one of your co-hosts, Crystal Tennille Irby, and executive producer of Dem Black Mamas podcast. And before we jump in, I would like to say thank you for your patience during our unexpected hiatus while I was healing from COVID. Now, if you like what you hear after you listen to the episode, invest in us. When you invest in Dem Black Mamas, you're investing in a platform curated by 3 Black women actively cultivating spaces rooted in healing, creativity, and liberation for Black mamas. There are a couple of things you can do to invest in us and help us continue to be Black Mama Built. Number 1, don't just listen, subscribe, and leave a review where you can. Number 2, share with at least one person who you feel can benefit from listening to this episode. Number 3, follow us and engage with us. We love to talk to you, so talk back to us. You can do that through social media comments, DM us, or email us with questions or comments at magic@demblackmamas.com. Number 4, join our email list so you can stay in the know and become a magic maker by visiting our website, demblackmamas.com. Number 5, make a contribution by becoming a patron, purchase merch, or make a one-time donation. All of those links are in our show notes on our website, demblackmamas.com. You can also find the bios of our guests, other links, and information relevant to this episode in our show notes as well. So be sure to check out those show notes on our website at, say it with me, y'all, demblackmamas.com. Now, let's get free, y'all, and jump into episode 38 of
Dem Black Mamas.
Welcome back to the ride, everyone. Welcome to the best podcast on earth, GPO.
Still doing that?
Hashtag, we're still doing that. We hadn't done it for enough episodes, so I could see if it works.
I didn't know it was coming with us into 2021, but
we're just testing it out. We didn't get it to the later quarter, at least until June, at least until Black Mama Creative Week.
GPO. Something
greatest
new.
podcast on earth. Hashtag. Shout out to Jania from North Carolina A&T who put me onto that. I'm Crystal Tennille Irby, mother of 4. Thea Moye is not with us today. She is traveling. She's doing something super duper exciting, and I'm sure she's going to want to talk all about it when she returns. But she is not with us today.
And I am Nikisha Killings, mother of 4.
And we have one of our guests who's going to be sticking around with us for the whole episode. I got nothing but love for people who want to stick around the whole episode because it's a journey.
A labor of love.
So,
it is. Yeah. You ride or die.
Yes, so I got nothing but love for them. So do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Michelle, and I am the mother of 2.
I am really... I always say excited, but that's because I think we do great stuff. But our topic today is raising transgender youth. So I'm so grateful for Michelle for coming on and joining us today.
We'll have one more guest join us for mac and cheese.
Her name is Jamarah, and she'll be joining us for the mac and cheese segment. So we're going to jump right into it. Our show outline is the same. We're going to start with church announcements, and then we're going to jump into mac and cheese, and then Black Mama Say.
That's it.
Okay.
All right.
So here we go. I do have a change with the church announcements, how we jump into it. So how we'll be jumping into it now is we will begin with the responsive reading.
We are truly in church.
Because you know that before you do anything in church, you pull out that hymnal with the responsive readings in it.
It's
so
true.
we have incorporated responsive readings. I'm not sure if I'll be calling on the energy of Ayanla in the future. I'm also working that out. So let's start with our responsive reading. And Nikisha, you want to, I have my mic. Nikisha, you want to tell the people where we're getting the responsive reading from?
I'm so excited. Yes. Yes. If you missed it, Dim Black Mamas had a winter solstice package that was
Yes,
lit.
we did.
And it included not only the best incense in the whole wide world from Smell Good Incense.
Smell Good Spa. Smell Good Spa.
That's it. Smell Good Spa. I don't know. They smell good and I buy from them. That's what I know for sure. And then also we had an intention box to set your intentions for the year with the instructions. Thank you so much. I laid it down. I know this year is going to hold for me.
Did you use your intention box? I'm so excited.
Yes.
I'm so excited. Okay.
Yes. What we are sharing from today, though, is our brand new cards, honey. Put a deck of cards in there. Each of us poured into. We put some gems, some knowledge, some, marching orders for you to really start your day or end your day. Whenever you want to use a card, once a week, however often you pull a card, it will feed you in that moment. And we're so excited about the deck of cards. And Crystal is going to be reading from them today.
Yes.
What card has risen to the top?
Let
honey?
me just
Tell
see.
us.
So this is from the book of Black Mama Magic, y'all.
Yes.
The responsive reading comes from card number 11.
Okay.
The chapter of Magic is Real, You Are Proof. I was hoping we pull a card that I wrote, but we didn't. We pulled a card that Nikisha wrote.
That's not what this moment's about. Stay in the moment. Okay. Magic is
Stay in the
real.
moment.
You
Magic
are
is real. Card number 11. Dear Mama, you are living proof that magic is real. Your story is a fantastical tale of imagined dreams come to fruition. Your power to heal, manifest, and create can only be explained as magical. You, majestic, beautiful, healed, healing, creative, you are magic personified. Sprinkle a little of your dust on the world today.
Yes.
That's card number 11 from the book of Black Mama Magic.
That's it.
So we are doing a summer solstice box.
We're just teasing. Save your coins. Get ready.
Box. All right. Going on sale in May. Get on the email list because you'll get the link early. And in the summer solstice box, Nikisha don't even know this yet. It'll be a full deck. This is a mini deck.
What?
This is a mini
nuggets.
deck.
I need to get some new nuggets down. Okay.
Yes, you got a deadline coming up you don't even know about.
I just got hot. Y'all know the deadline stressed me out.
She don't even have one of those sleeves and she hot. Okay. But it'll be a full deck. This is a mini deck of 27 cards. And in the summer solstice box, there'll be a full deck. So shout out to all the people who bought winter solstice boxes, who supported us to help us pay for SoundCloud, Lisbon, Zoom, just
keeping the lights on.
The bills, keeping the lights on. We appreciate
yes.
y'all. We appreciate y'all for coming through. But sign up for our email list. Go to our website, dimblackmamas.com, and you can sign up for the email list so that you can get the link. They're going on sale publicly May 1st, the summer solstice boxes, but I may drop the link a little bit early for folks that's on the email list.
That just
I
sounds
will.
like she's moving the deadline back from
I will drop the link early to the people on the email list. So sign up. So we have some great things that are going to be in the summer solstice box. So that's our responsive reading. So now we're going to jump into church announcements, praise reports, and prayer requests. My prayer request is for people who have COVID, people who have lost someone due to COVID, people who had COVID. So I am sending love, light, and healing and putting all those people on the prayer list as we continue to move through this pandemic. So that is my prayer list request. Church announcements. I have a writing workshop coming up. I'll put the link for that in the bio. It is called I Am Writing Personal and Artistic Statements. This is not just for artists. This is for anyone, because at some point you're going to have to tell someone who you are. whether it be in a cover letter, grad school, trying to get a grant, trying to get a job, you're going to have to let someone know who you are. And I teach you how to write about yourself in a liberated way that can push your dreams forward. So I'll put the link for that in the show notes. I think those are all of my church announcements. So Keish or Michelle, want to go next?
Yeah. So I think I had a similar prayer request. It is not lost on me that there are many folks of color who are frontline workers, who are daily exposed to COVID in myriad ways, and that you may be struggling with the idea of a vaccine and what that means for you and yours. That's not lost on me. I just wanted to honor you and recognize where you are and know that there's so much historically that impacts the decisions that you're having to make for yourself in this moment. And it's not easy. And I respect where you fall on that, but certainly honor the space that you may find yourself in this moment in time.
And shout out to all the Black frontline and medical workers who are using their platforms to educate about the vaccine and to really honor where Black people are when it comes to the medical system. So I appreciate
without
that.
shame and blame, because we recognize where you are. So we appreciate that. As far as announcements, your girl is the keynote speaker for Gold Lactations Conference coming up in March. Your girl.
And where can I get tickets? You want me to drop the ticket link?
We can drop the link. We'll drop the link.
Okay.
The keynote is free and open to the public.
They must be paying you big bucks. It's free and open to the public. Nikisha is getting a Chizak. You hear me? It's free. It's free and open to the public. You getting a Chizak. Okay.
2021 is my year for abundance.
You know what it means when something is free? It means that the people putting on the conference already got their money.
You know what? So the opening keynote is free and open. The conference is not, but you can get this keynote. And I'm really excited about it because I'm doing some new research into empathy and what it looks like to be a care provider right now. The title is Providing Care When You're Barely There.
Say it again for the people, Keish.
Providing care when you're barely there.
Let me tell you something. Aha moment, Maven.
You know what? Stop it. It's about reimagining empathy post-COVID when we are completely burnt out and don't feel like we have anything left to give. We still have an obligation to be empathic and empathetic to the folks that we care for in their birthing experience. And it's not easy. And the traditional perspectives of empathy are patriarchal. And we are going to shake it all up and decolonize it and come at it from a way that makes more sense.
Pause for the cause. For the cause.
Yes, ma'am.
Say that about empathy again and patriarchy. You know, I always have to pause for the cause on patriarchy. Say that again.
The traditional, perspective on empathy and the way that we look at it, just imagine yourself in someone else's shoes. That doesn't really speak to us. It doesn't resonate with those of us who've been in care work and ancestrally, know how to care for one another. It's not about imagining yourself in someone else's shoes. We got to look at this thing differently. We're shaking it up. So that's what I'll be doing to kick off 2021.
And Nikisha will also be on an IG Live with me. She doesn't know it yet, but if she getting checks to free conferences, she needs to be on some kind of live with me so I can get some of that abundant energy. That was a surprise announcement as well.
Is that what we're doing?
It's a surprise announcement as well.
Nikisha, you show up and Crystal just continues to add to your to-do list.
And she
your
knows
calendar.
how this stresses me out. She knows how it stresses me out. All right, just tell me where to be and when to be.
But congratulations, though.
Thank you.
That is a huge deal. And I know how hard you've been working. So that is a huge deal. So congratulations. Yeah. So we'll have those links in the show notes. So please make sure that you check our show notes for those links and follow Nikisha at Aha Moment Maven. Will you have stuff on your Instagram page about it as well?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you.
Make sure you check the show notes and follow her at Aha Moment Maven. Are those all of yours?
That's it.
Okay. All right. Michelle, do you have any church announcements, prayer list requests?
I do have a prayer list request.
Okay.
I want to start in gratitude and really be prayerful for all of us in our community who have had our hopes shattered. We started this COVID year in March, hoping we just had to get through 3 months to slow the tide and stem the curve. And we thought we were turning the corner. And as we started the new year, there was a lot of celebrations and excitement only to feel shattered by what went on in our country. So I do want to shift our thinking and remind us to be grateful. Gratitude is free. And we need to constantly do our own self-talk each morning, evening, day, just to be grateful and focus on the goodness in our lives, because that's really going to get us through, make sure our mental balance is stable so we can thrive. We can thrive through the rest of this awful time, not only in our country, but dealing with a global pandemic and so many people who are suffering right now.
Yes.
So even in the midst of that, I am grateful. I'm grateful for you two. I'm grateful for Dem Black Mamas. I'm grateful for the work that you all are doing for our community. And we need to sort of hold a light and a candle for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a great way to close it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
that's
for that.
Beautiful. I really appreciate that. And gratitude. I work with a coach and she says, gratitude is the language of those who live in abundance.
Ooh.
So, and it's easy to forget that you have things to be grateful for. So those are our church announcements and prayer list requests. Please keep those events, dates, and prayer requests in mind. And for information as well as inspiration, you can follow us on all social media platforms at Dem Black Mamas Podcast, and check us out on our website at demblackmamas.com. And I think a lot of times people want to invest in us and amplify our platform, but they really don't know how. One of the ways that you can do that is to become a patron, where you pay a monthly amount as little as $2 a month. You can get in right now to invest in us and help us stay Black Mama Built, or you can buy some merch. And we have those links in our show notes as well. You can give a one-time donation as well. That link will be in our show notes. And if nothing else, just tell at least one person about us. Share the episode with one person who you feel like can benefit from listening to us.
Yes.
So it's now time for our mac and cheese segment. And we miss Thea Monnier. She's not here. She's doing something really, really beautiful and exciting that she's probably going to talk about when she's back. So I'm introing our mac and cheese segment. And I'm really excited about our guest. I'm excited to learn, and I'm excited that this is going to be liberating, for sure. So I am going to introduce one of our guests, Jamarah Amani.
You can call me Jai.
Okay, I'll call you Jai. That's so much easier for me because I'm not great with the pronunciation. So I'll call you Jai. Jai is a community midwife who believes in the transformative and healing power of birth, and that every baby has a human right to human milk. Her mission is to do her part to build a movement of birth justice locally, nationally, and globally. As a birth worker and advocate, Jai has been tackling the epidemics of Black maternal and infant morbidity and mortality for over 15 years. She is currently the director of Southern Birth Justice Network, which is also a kindred partner of Black Woman Matters Alliance, which we are as well, a 501c3 nonprofit organization working to expand the birth justice movement and to make midwifery and doula care accessible to all. She is also the founder of National Black Midwives Alliance, the only national professional association specifically for midwives of African descent. Jai is the recipient of the 2019 Trailblazer Award from the City of Miami. She has been featured in a variety of media outlets, including PBS, NPR, NBC, and publications such as the Miami Times and the South Florida Times, among others. She has written for several blogs, including the Huffington Post, and is currently a fellow of Echoing Ida. Really? Oh my God, that's awesome. Okay. I have a huge obsession with Ida B. Wells and Vanity Hamer. It's like a thing for me. And Ntozake Shange.
You see my earrings?
And you got a little bit of Ntozake going on right now too. A community of Black women and non-binary writers. In addition to parenting 4 children and jumping in the ocean whenever possible, Jai offers midwifery care to families across South Florida and workshops on birth justice to organizations across the United States. Welcome.
Welcome. I love that. What a beautiful, beautiful bio. All right. We got one more guest with us today. We have Michelle. Michelle is a parent, educator, and advocate. Michelle uses she, her pronouns. She's the mother of a trans son, AFAB, assigned female at birth. Michelle is involved locally as a parent facilitator and board member of an organization dedicated to serving families with transgender loved ones. Parent support groups are critical and provide opportunities to gather information and resources, meet and listen to stories of others, and provide support in a safe, confidential, and non-judgmental space. She's an advocate at the state and local level, sharing her story to help shape protective rights for transgender persons within the schools and at the state level. Her son's privacy is her paramount concern, so she uses a pseudonym to protect her son's identity. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
That's one of our favorite parts of the show. We love to read the bios because it's like giving Black women their roses while they're still here. So that's like one of my favorite things to do. So we are going to jump right in. And I want to just talk a little bit about the intention of this episode. I really wanted to do something that really pushed us, Black people, towards liberation, because this is a show for and about Black mothers. And so we often talk about the work that we have within our own communities to fully embrace our liberation. So the intention of this episode is to amplify the experience of Black mothers raising transgender children so that we can continue to build a more liberated world. So I'm so grateful that you all are here and you were willing to take the time to share your experiences. So we always like to know people's journey and their story. So our first question is usually always the same lately. Where were you when your journey as the mother of a transgender child began? And did you think you would be where you are now?
So I love that question because we're talking about a transformation. We're talking about then and now. And we know as mothers, we transition and we change over time as we move from a single woman to a married woman to a woman without children to a mother. And so when I think about my journey, I will say that I was a much older parent. I had my first child when I was in my 20s, my second in my late 30s. And frankly, I figured I had it all covered. You know, I had raised a child to a teenager. She was still alive and safe and becoming a productive adult. And I learned very quickly that each child is different. Each story is different. And as a mother, I had to shift to understand who my new child was, who my youngest child was. And frankly, you know, when my child started asking questions, I was unprepared. Not that I wasn't always progressive and a strong supporter of the LGBT community, but lived experience is very different from theoretical frameworks and ideas.
Come on now.
I remember, you know, how you have children in the room while adults are doing things. And there was a movie on the television. And after the film was over, a couple hours later, my child came up to me and said, "So you can be a boy if you're a girl?" And, you know, with my evolved self, I talked about gender identity and expression, you know, absolutely. And at that moment, if I could sort of reimagine that moment, it looked like a light bulb went off for my kid. And after that, the questionings began. He was 7 at the time. And even though I was always situated in understanding these, and I will call them theoretical frameworks, a lived experience, and having your child question who they are and their gender identity at a very young age was earth-shattering in many ways. You know, we had to lean into the unknown. We had to learn quickly. We had to find communities, and we had to navigate a very new terrain so we could support his identity growth. And while I will say I was supportive immediately, I would be lying if I didn't say I wasn't scared, I wasn't anxious, There were many times I was looking for understanding and information, and I would go down my own rabbit hole of worry and anxiety for days and weeks. But ultimately, we firmly believed that our child had the right to be his authentic self and knew it was our responsibility as a parent to support that growth. In finding those communities and conferences, I was able to surround myself with information. And when I think back to who I was then and who I am now, I was the parent seeking, questioning myself, worrying a lot. And now I have grown in full confidence where I'm the parent who is giving support to other mothers who are going through this journey.
I heard so much. I was taking copious notes as you were talking. Early in that answer, I heard, and I think this is probably often the case that we find ourselves being a different parent the second time around. But I think it's so beautiful to give ourselves a permission to evolve as a mother, as a person, as a parent in this role. And I love that you gave yourself the latitude to do that, and that you assume the posture of a student and assume the posture of, I'm going to help this child on their path, wherever they're going, and just be here to support and protect and, whatever else, but certainly not to stifle. That's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. What about you, Job?
Well, my transgender son, also assigned female at birth, came out when he was 16. I'm queer, and, my household has always been inclusive, and we have friends that are non-binary, transgender. And so it was just like saying my new favorite color is red. I mean, it was more of just like, oh, that makes sense. He had been a tomboy growing up. And I think going into middle school and high school had kind of suppressed some of that because of peer pressure and bullying that he experienced, and had gone through some mental health challenges and some therapy, and then just came to me and was like, this is who I am. I'm a guy. And I was like, okay, that makes total sense to me. What do we need to do? He had already selected his name and told me that he wanted to use he and his pronouns. His coming out in the family was pretty normalized. And with my younger children, because Micah is my oldest, with my younger children, we just sat them down and just explained it to them. And their questions were like, are you still going to be able to have a wedding one day? Are you my brother or my sister now? They wanted to understand kind of how this impact our relationship and where your life is going. And then it was just, matter of fact, it was just, this is what it is. And I think, once you set that standard of just acceptance, there's not a lot of turmoil around it. Of course, in the world, that's different. But in my family, we can love unconditionally. We can be who we are. We can embrace our full selves and our identities, so that we are stronger to deal with what's out there in the world. I think the most interesting and probably most challenging experience for me was really my coming out process as a parent, because you have to reintroduce your child to the world. This was senior year, so there were lots of graduation posts, and, he's going off to college, and I'm like writing the post like, okay, he, and then feeling like, okay, well, I have to explain that, because all these years I've been making social media posts about my kids and about this particular child that says she. So I had to make a coming out post. I had to make coming out phone calls to family when we were going to family gatherings to tell my grandmother that his name is now Micah, and he's going to use he and his pronouns, and I'm going to ask everyone in the family to respect that. So that was quite a process. And it was, I was a little nervous, but it was necessary. And I didn't want my anxieties or nervousness to in any way, negatively affect my son. So I just had to go to my support system and my therapy to process, the things that I was feeling, so that I could come to a place of just embracing and accepting him, and also being Mama Bear, being like, no, you're not going to misgender my son. No, you're not going to disrespect him. And that's just posture that I've taken from the beginning. But it has definitely been a point of growth. I did consider myself an ally. I do consider myself an ally to the transgender community. And I also realized that there were a lot of things that I did and thought that were very cis-normative and transphobic, unwittingly. But there were a lot of things I had to examine about the way I raised my children, in gendered ways, the assumptions that I made. Even my own allyship was deeply flawed. Oof. As a cis person, I had to ask myself some deep questions. Even as a midwife, that's the profession that I'm in. I have an opportunity to talk to a lot of parents about gender early on, and the gendering starts from the womb. And so even like thinking about more expansive ways to have those conversations with the families that I serve, so that there is this kind of openness and expansiveness and inclusiveness from day one versus, okay, everything's pink, everything's blue. We're doing gender reveals. Like, how damaging is that to trans youth that then have to undo something that has been forced on them versus coming into a family that's open and expansive and asking deeper questions like, who are you? Who do you want to be? How do you see yourself? What is your identity? That's something that I'm learning still. And I came to that later through the experience of my son, that there are ways to parent that are more gender inclusive and gender fluid that would help to mitigate some of the pain that trans youth experience when they do discover or embrace who they are.
So your son came out when he was 16, and you said that it made sense. So why did it make sense to you?
Because he was always a tomboy growing up. So it didn't seem out of place.
Frankly, I often hear people dismissing children who are transgender when they do tell their parents.
I wonder, Michelle, if you heard that along the way. There's no way. Your child is too young to make this assertion.
Yes, because your child came out at
7.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we as a community foster our own social ideas and frameworks onto our children because we've lived out our lives in those social frameworks. And so, I love what John talked about, because even though she was a part of a queer community, there is a deconstruction of your own social sensibilities in order for you to honor and embrace all expressions of the human experience. And we have to begin to understand how deeply embedded some of those social ideas are, because they then become social norms, right? They become truths. It's just not correct and it's not accurate. So for me, when I think back on my child's younger years from birth to 6, there were clues. And so when he articulated his gender identity, we could recognize him for who he was, right? So it makes sense, just like any mother who is keyed into her child, like, your children, right? You know who they are at their essence. And by their essence, I mean their characteristics that make them who they are and different from your other children. But when we become so deeply entrenched in what it means to be a girl and what it means to be a boy, we can then sometimes miss some really big clues.
You used the word earth-shattering. When you say that it was earth-shattering, what was earth-shattering about it for you, Michelle?
For me, what was earth-shattering was not that he was coming out as a boy. What was earth-shattering is that I thought I was inclusive and liberated, right? I thought I was evolved. And so when I felt hesitation or nervous or anxiety, I had to question myself and I had to question my own presuppositions. And every time I hit upon something in this experience that made me feel uneasy, I knew that this wasn't necessarily about my child, but this was about my own rearing. And I had some work to do in private so I could be the best parent for my kid.
That's been consistent across both of your journeys. First of all, what I'm hearing is that both of your children were not only accepted, that was the word you used, Ja, but also affirmed. They had a lot less trouble standing in their truth than their mamas did in trying to really grow and expand what you already thought was pretty open. We're a queer household. We accept all, we love all. But ouch, I got to learn how to decolonize a little bit more, deconstruct some things.
And I had to deal with the guilt of not knowing sooner.
Talk about that.
I really felt like, it was almost like, duh, And then I thought back on all the times that he didn't want to wear dresses or do girly things and kind of being like, no, just put on the dress nice because we're going to a nice event or whatever. We're going to see grandma and she would love to see you in this dress. And I had to think about how did I contribute to, some of his challenges or even his delay in accepting himself, because he went through a couple of years of mental health challenges before even accepting it himself. And I had to really grapple with what was my role in that as a parent, which is why I talk about being more gender fluid in our parenting from day one, because our kids don't know, our transgender children may not know at 7 or 5 or 10, but as they're coming into it, we can create an environment that is embracing of those questions that they ask. And I love this story that Michelle shared about watching the movie and the question that came up and being sensitive to that, because a lot of parents might have been very dismissive. And that's a message that a child gets like, oh, that's taboo. There's a stigma around that. Oh, let me not ask that question. Let me leave that alone. And may not even be able to explore within themselves those questions because they've been shut down. So those were some of the things that I reflected on as a parent. And of course, like we always have mom guilt about what we didn't do, right? And so I had to let that go because I do still have younger children. My other kids are 14, 9, and 7. And I had to just kind of rethink some of the messaging, even subtle, messaging that they might be getting from me around gender and kind of shift that into a different zone in the effort to embrace their older brother, but also an effort to make sure that they are able to embrace themselves.
Can you give us an example of the things that you recognize in yourself, like how you weren't parenting in a gender fluid way?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many examples, right? Because everything in our world is gendered. So everything we see on TV, clothing, toys. And I think just because of how I was raised and socialized, you just pass that on. I can think of an example. I was at a thrift store because I get some of my children's toys from the thrift store, well, pre-COVID. And I was in line and I was getting one of those wooden kitchen sets. And, my son was a toddler. There was a person in line behind me and they said, well, why would you be getting that for your son? You don't want him to become a woman. And I'm like, I had to really think about that. Like, okay, well, most of the top chefs in the world are men. Men should know how to cook. How dare you gender my child? But those are the kind of things that I think we encounter all the time. Boys should do this. Girls should do that. Boys should wear this. Girls should wear that. Assuming people's pronouns based on how they look, those kinds of things. And I actually have the piece that I have written that has some advice for Black parents or Black cisgender folks that are trying to support trans youth. There are some, few things that we can just do or not do. So whenever it's appropriate, I can share that.
Now.
Okay. And I would love for Michelle to weigh in on this too, because I'm sure there are many more, but these were just the top 5 things that I thought that Black cisgender folks can do to support Black trans youth that may be coming out or questioning their gender. So the one is about pronouns. We make a lot of assumptions about people's pronouns based on how they look, but it's really simple to ask. And they're not preferred pronouns. They're just pronouns, right? So always use a person's correct pronouns and don't ask them what they prefer. This is just who they are. And a lot of people that are new to that might feel embarrassed and stumble with the pronouns, especially if the pronouns of the person don't match what your assumption is about how you perceive them. And one thing I've learned from my son is that he's so gracious. He really doesn't mind when people stumble as long as they're trying and they're sincere. So keep trying to get it right. Of course, an apology is appropriate, but don't dismiss or minimize or place your guilt on the person if you've gotten their pronouns wrong or over-explain it. Just, my bad, I meant to say, and then just keep going, because making a big deal of it also can make a person feel uncomfortable. That's number 1. And then number 2, stop gendering everything. Actually, most things that are gendered don't even need to be. And our opinions on other people's gender really doesn't matter. It's actually their business to define their gender identity. And if you're still grappling with concepts around gender, recognize that it's your journey and it's not the other person's journey, and not making it the work of transgender and non-binary people to educate or convince you of their humanity.
I think that's so important with at least 3 of us on here in birth work and supporting, birthing people. It's really important not to assume that birthing person goes by she or her, or wants to be called mama or any of those
Absolutely.
things. It's really important to speak to them the way they tell you they want to be spoken to, right? I'm struggling with not using prefer. That's new. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Jim.
Absolutely. And I think within birth work, there is so much gender. We assume that everyone that births is a woman, and things are so feminized. And I just want to actually just give a shout out to Caden Coleman, who has a workshop on Black transgender birthing and fertility experiences. I just took his workshop a few weeks ago, and it was excellent because I think wherever possible, we should uplift the work of Black trans people. I believe his website is cadencoleman.com, and I can share that.
Yes, we'll try to get that in the show notes.
But that's specifically for birth workers. Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important when it comes to birth work, specifically when it comes to Black birth workers and the term mother or mama, right? Because in our culture, there's a lot attached to Black mama. I mean, this podcast is called Them Black Mamas. And one of the things that I have struggled with and that I'm really trying to explore is, what can I do with the name of our podcast? And how can we expand the language to make sure that people know we want this to be a gender expansive, a gender inclusive space? Because even as a birth worker, I don't use the term mom, I use the term birth person. But I have found in birth work that people are really, really attached to gender, more so when it comes to the parent, I think, than they even are to the child.
I'm curious, because when you name the show, there are 3 Black moms, right? And so you're talking about your experience as Black mother. But when I think about birthing or shepherding into the world, that allows you to be expansive, right? Because it's not just the physical act of shepherding into the world. It is the act of shepherding new ideas, new concepts, new ways of being into our society and holding space for that. In birth work, you're ultimately holding the space, right, for the parents. So I understand there is always going to be a problem with language because it's automatically tied to traditional meanings. But I really think we can, redefine our language so it works in our modern world.
Yeah.
And I do think language is sort of the last part of liberation sometimes, right? Because
the first part.
You think so? Yeah. The first part? Really?
Because it's so much about how we understand ourselves. And what we do at Southern Birth Justice with the Birth Justice Framework is we include the both and. And it's actually based in African cosmology.
Okay, come on now, come through. Okay.
And this goes to my next point about things that Black folks can do. Is really to recognize the legacy and history of Black transgender people. And that this is not a new concept, because I think that that's something that people kind of think too, like, oh, this new age or this new generation. But really, when you look at ancient Yoruba traditions, Two-Spirit indigenous philosophy, the Harlem Renaissance era, really anything spiritual or artistic from people of color, you're going to find queer folks, you're going to find people shifting gender norms, you're going to find intersexuality. I mean, the place where intersex people are born in the highest numbers is in South Africa. And so just looking around the world at African people wherever we are, and this concept of both and the spectrum being fluid. I mean, there's tons of cross-dressing festivals traditionally around the world, but particularly I look at Africa. And so this is something that is actually indigenous to our culture, and that I think Eurocentric ideas of binaries, Black and white, men and women, good and evil, really have separated us from ourselves and from the fullness of what it means to be human. And so re-embracing that and recognizing that legacy and history is part of, how we can support Black transgender youth and people.
Well, that is.
Your pronouns are she and her. Correct, Ja?
Yes. I don't know if I said that. She and her. Yes. And queen.
Queen.
Hello.
So much came up as you were saying that. There is an indigenous culture somewhere where gender spontaneously changes around puberty as well.
Dominican
That's
Republic.
really, really fascinating. I want to say, Crystal, that I really feel like Dim Black Mamas is speaking to any person who identifies as such, as both Black and a mama.
Right.
There certainly are some trans women who identify with the stuff that we talk about. They've mothered through, some children and some younger folks through processes, and they identify with us. And we're open to anyone who self-identifies with both being Black and having a mothering experience, which is unique and is a journey, you know what I mean, for folks to identify with.
When I think about language, I feel like I have more language than I did 10 years ago that gives me greater understanding when it comes to gender. But, I don't know a lot about African cosmology. So maybe I need to get up on that.
Ancestral knowledge, boo.
And know, right. And know that the language has always been here. And I think when I think about the title of our show, I just wonder if there are clues or ways in which, even though people identify, they can also say, these folks are here for me. Like I think about how we spell woman is sometimes spelled WOMXN.
Oh, why?
To let people know that this is a gender expansive experience. And so when I visually look at the title Dim Black Mamas, I lately, probably about the past 2 years, I look at the word mamas and I wonder, is there a way in which I can do something with that spelling to let people know we are here for them? Because definitely when I see WOMXN, I know what that means.
And I wanted to shout out Black Mamas Matter Alliance too, because if you go to the site, there's a definition that explains that the term mamas is also inclusive and includes trans and gender fluid and gender nonconforming folks. Like you said, there are ways to kind of redefine and repurpose terminology, but I think the best thing to really do is to ask the people who are impacted by these terms, right? Because we don't want to define other people's realities or identities or prescribe that for them.
I also think that we have to push our own understanding about how meaning is encoded in language and push ourselves and our communities to really question themselves and those messages. And I'll give you an example. I had an older daughter, and so I thought I knew how to raise a girl. And one of the most scary things for me was trying to figure out how to raise a Black son, because 2 girls, I'm raising strong Black, independent women, and I already have an idea of what that means for me, right? I'm raising strong Black feminists. So I was really stumped and worried. How do I raise a Black son? I don't even understand that. But then I had to question myself. What I'm doing is living solidly in a binary, right? I'm thinking about how to raise a strong Black man, but I also have to think about like toxic masculinity that disallows for the spectrum of male expression, right? Because if we want to live in a binary so rigidly, it disallows us, cisgender folks, the full expression of our human experience, right? We can't even see ourselves in the gender fluid. And we know that there is both the feminine and the masculine in each of us. So we have to push ourselves to constantly question and challenge our own norms and assumptions alongside of creating an inclusive community, because it really starts with how narrow our own understandings are.
That's true.
Thank you for saying that. I really, really honor that. And I feel that way about all forms of oppression, particularly with transphobia. I see a lot of folks kind of leaning into it. I mean, it's everywhere, from the fact that it's hilarious when a man puts on a dress, all these comedians and stuff like that, and we just laugh at it. We're conditioned to think that those things are funny, but really they're hurtful. to a lot of trans people. And I think that what happens is we deny ourselves the fullness of our own humanity by, ridiculing or oppressing others. And when I see people that are rejecting of transgender people, I'm asking, like, what are you rejecting about yourself? What are you afraid of? What is it about your masculinity or your femininity that you feel might be called into question if you don't take this hard line around gender? I 100% agree with Michelle that it starts with really questioning our own assumptions and our own identities. Like, what is my relationship to gender? I had to start asking myself that. What am I invested in? And how do I feel about myself? And when you can start to be honest about that, then you can extend that humanity to others. So the last two things I wanted to say was just really to be an advocate and to be loud about creating safe spaces. And this comes up a lot with bathrooms and really advocating for gender neutral bathrooms, because the perception is that a person who is cisgender might be unsafe in a bathroom with a transgender person, which is absolutely untrue. The statistics show that it is transgender people that are unsafe in bathrooms with cisgender people. And so we have to challenge that notion and really be advocates for gender neutral bathrooms to be everywhere so that transgender people don't have to have encounters that put them in unsafe situations. They're the ones whose lives are threatened consistently and who, are murdered. I mean, the number of Black trans women murdered just for being who they are is astronomical and is something that we should all be standing up against. And then also just really being an advocate for youth in particular, for arts places for transgender youth to express their creativity and give voice, and to just really normalize the presence of transgender people in every space. So I'd love to see this show again and to see transgender youth on here speaking, or, transgender parents even, because I think that a lot of times we're talking about trans people and they're not in the conversation. And so I would love to see this conversation continue with the representation of transgender people speaking their own stories and realities. And I'm going to put in a shameless plug for my son. His name is Jamarah Amani, and he makes music. So support Black trans youth art. He can be found on Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, all the places you get your music. Jamarah Amani, Mikh, and last name Amani. He makes great music. We'll
put it in our show notes. And I know that you have to run, so I want to honor your time if you have to go.
To go speak on another panel.
I demand.
Michelle's going to stick around, so we're going to continue the conversation. But I do want to thank you.
Absolutely. This was fun. Thank you all so much for having me. Have fun continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Ja. Take care.
It was great meeting you, Ja.
Too.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Peace.
Michelle, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I wanted to just share a simple story, because there was a question about how do we live in our gendered world with our children, and how do we raise them in gender norms. And this is a really sort of short, simple story, but an hour before my son came out, he wanted to cut his hair. And you know how we feel about the hair in the Black community, right?
Yes.
So I struggled. I struggled. And this was a kid who cried and yelled every time I pulled out the comb from the drawer. And so I thought to myself, the kid wants to get their hair cut. Why are you resistant? What is your issue with that? You have short hair. You cut your hair off, in your 20s. It took me probably 6 months to agree to that, because I had my own work to do unraveling the piece around Black identity, girl identity, hair in our community, what that means in the relationship to mother, to child, to honor my child's request. And it was a simple request, right? It was so simple. When we cut that child's hair off, let me tell you, liberation for him, liberation for me, party all around. But that shows that even when we feel we're open and progressive and liberated, sometimes we don't even understand why we're tied to things and ideas, and we have to really work through them.
And we're tied to that because part of cutting the hair is, number one, it's body autonomy, right? It's the child making a decision about their body. And sometimes we associate that with being too grown or trying to be an adult. So we want to maintain control over their bodies. And hair is kind of an easy thing for us to control. The other part of it, when it comes, I think, specifically to Black girls, is adultification. So we know that our children are adultified at an early age. So that short hair in this culture can signal, oh, they are an adult or grown up because we've attached long hair to youth. Yeah. But that's our stuff. And like you said, we have to consistently ask ourselves questions like, why can't my kid cut their hair? And then when we start to do the deep dive, we realize how colonized we really are. And the stories that we have accepted. My sister had the same thing. My niece wanted to dye her hair purple. I mean, she's an artist. And, I raised an artist. So I'm like, yeah, it's not that she's trying to be grown. She's trying to express herself. And she wants purple hair. She's not asking to shoot heroin. She's asking to color her hair that if it falls out, guess what? Yeah. It will grow back.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah. So we really have to do like a real deep dive when our children do ask us for body autonomy things and how much, am I saying that right? Bodily autonomy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Bodily, Nikisha, you always have to jump in for me. I listen back to episodes and I pronounce the stuff wrong. And I'm like, and Nikisha sat there. She sat there and let me say it like that.
You just let it roll.
And I know she knows how to pronounce it. But we have to do a deep dive. And that is a way in which we raise our children in a gendered way. My son wants his ear pierced. And I was struggling. I was like, what? So, but I really had to ask myself a lot of questions about what message do I think that this is going to, it's really about my fear. That's the bottom line. Right. It was about my fear about what message this is going to send.
Yeah, I'm learning today that so much of this is about, again, resting on the parent and how they are experiencing this much more than children. I'm actually really encouraged when I see our young folks today, and I sound real old saying that, but when you see gatherings of pre-COVID, gatherings of middle schoolers and high schoolers, you see quite gender expansive groups clustered together. I believe there is more acceptance, more affirmation today around these concepts than there was. Certainly we have a long way to go. And I think Michelle can probably speak to that more than either of us. But I believe, has your child been able to find their village, their folks, their people? Michelle?
I would say yes. I agree, for individuals and families and kids who knew my child before he transitioned socially, there is some coming out stories that have to happen. The kids wanted to make sure that they're getting the pronouns right. There may be a few questions here or there, but they move very easily and quickly into relation with the person who they know, right? That they've been in relationships with. And parents have all sorts of inappropriate questions,
really,
because they want to take your child. And again, my child transitioned when he was younger. They want you to give them answers to what's going to happen when they're 20 and 30 and 40 and 50.
We don't know that about any of our children.
Nope.
We didn't know that about ourselves, right? Think about you and how old you are now. It's taking you a long time to figure it out, right? So can't we give that same grace to children?
Mm-hmm.
So I do agree, Nikisha, that there are much more gender expansive communities of young people. And my son has found affirmation and acceptance. But for me, affirmation is not the goal. Civil rights is the goal, right? Legal protections is the goal. My husband and I, we're in a very privileged space and we have choices and we can choose to live and work and socialize in affirming and progressive communities that support rights for the LGBTQ community. However, that's why I think it is so critical that all individuals work to make sure that there are civil rights protections, because there are so many young people who are living in communities where they don't have choice, and it's unsafe, it's dangerous, it's violent. And the statistics show that members of the Black trans community are getting killed at a much higher rate in this country than others.
So where is the disconnect? Because if the experience of the child and what we're seeing among the youth is more expansive, but what we're seeing in homelessness, suicide, mental health, finding a job is harder, or the statistics are worse for transgender youth, specifically transgender Black youth, then where is the disconnect?
You know, it lies with us. It lies with our generation and the generation ahead of us. We are not willing to stand. You know, there are people who stand for, right? You want to stand for a group of people, but are you willing to stand against those that seek to disenfranchise? And that is ultimately the issue. We have to do better in the Black community to not only say, oh, we accept you in these spaces, but we are willing to make sure that your rights are secured. And I'm talking about your legal, your medical, your housing, employment protection, those rights, our educational protections. They have to be protected. And we've seen the civil rights protections over the last 4 years eroded. The progress and gains that we made under the Obama administration have been dismantled, and they're seriously threatened right now. And I will say that when I attend conferences, I don't see as many Black parents in these conferences and organizations. I see so many white families that are supporting their children. I don't see as many Black parents. We have to get involved in this fight.
Yeah, I would agree. We talked about having to decolonize constructs, and I think there's a huge opportunity here for us as a people to push back on some of the societal norms that were pushed upon us, that were forced upon us. As John said earlier, we're so far removed from some of the African cosmology and some of the beautiful ancestral knowledge that we have about being more expansive in our views of gender. We have been boxed into this Black and white, as she said, perspective for so long. So much of that is very, very narrow, and a very strategic part of that is always having someone to oppress, always having someone to other, right? Someone less than you, or the ranking and the hierarchy. And so I think that this is a group that we have allowed to be oppressed among us. And that we have some work to do, to your point, Michelle, to stand up and not just advocate for, but stand in opposition against those who will remove their civil liberties. And I think that's marching orders for every single one of us who says we are an ally.
And I think the Black Lives Matter movement is really trying to emphasize this point. This is all Black lives, period. There's so many who talk about building coalitions among others. That's work that needs to be done. But we have to build a coalition among ourselves.
Within ourselves. When you look at stats among transgender youth or children, it's a lot of negative stats. And I wonder in that, how do you remain optimistic and speak life into your child?
I think really the same way Black people claim joy in their experience in this society. I don't necessarily think of it as any different, because when you look at the many ways Black individuals in our community have endured suffering and can fall in the gaps in this community. But we don't really believe in the coming up the rough side of the mountain story in our household. Struggling for liberation to us is a birthright. And there is pride and love and joy and life in that story, right? I'm not willing to separate struggle and joy. And I also think that my child at 7 was told, you absolutely have the right to be your authentic self. And at such a young age, there's an awesome power to that. We're very aware of the challenges and the forces in society, as well as the mental health challenges, right? Therapy is so important because they need to have support to deal with gender dysphoria, to deal with the negative images that pervade our society, to deal with cruelty. But we are teaching our child to stand in his truth. And as he grows in confidence in the world, he will navigate the world just in the same way we do as Black people in this U.S. society.
We believe on here that our children can be our greatest teachers. So what is the greatest lesson that your child has taught you?
That parenting is rough.
I think they're all teaching us that. Yes.
It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity.
It's a lifelong endeavor.
Yes.
It's rough. Yes.
But I think seriously for me, wow, I think his journey has been liberating for us. You know, you say you're an ally, you say you support, but his journey has challenged us and pushed us to stand out front, right? To fight, to struggle, to honor, and to work towards being our own authentic selves, right? I'm trying to teach my child to be his authentic self. That requires me to dismantle my own stuff so I can be my authentic self. I think I'm a much better parent today than I was parenting with my first child, because I probably parented in fear. And now I parent in knowledge.
Get that.
I heard you talk earlier about when you go to conferences and things, you don't see enough of us in those spaces. Why do you think that is?
Well, I will say one of the conferences that I attend every year is the Trans Wellness Conference in Philadelphia. It's a national conference. It's free for all members. And there's the spectrum of every individual at that conference. But I do feel like there needs to be more African-American parents that show up in those spaces, because Black trans youth that have parents who do not support them, who've disowned them, who've thrown them out on the street, they need to see people like them, members from their community, so that they know that there is a safe space, right? We always want to see people who look like us doing the work for us. And Black parents need the tools to support our children. Why they aren't there is because, you know, many in our community, they don't want to recognize their children's truth. And so they turn away from the truth. And when you turn away from the truth, you turn away from your child.
It is true. It's true.
It's been so eye-opening. I mean, just in listening to you all talk about how it made you all dig deeper to live your authentic truth. So,
yes. Thank you. Thank you. I would also invite audience members, if you are a transgender parent, if you are parenting a child who has gone through this transition or is experiencing it now, we would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your stories. We appreciate you listening, and we hope everyone has learned something. We hope all them Black mamas audience has learned and grown from today's conversation. I certainly have.
I do want to say this. When I asked you to be on here, Michelle, you didn't say yes right away. Your first answer was, well, let me check with my son. And what that signaled to me was allowing your child to lead and you not telling your child's story. Because we are a podcast about not telling our children's story, but telling our stories of our mothering experience. It's a fine line for us not to tell our children's stories, but this is really a podcast about mamas and not about our children necessarily, but about the motherhood journey. And so when I saw that, I thought that's a lesson for me right there, just in making sure that I check in with my children when I'm going to do things that will somehow, in some way, shape, or form, involve their story. So I really, really appreciated that lesson.
Well, thank you for saying that.
I wanted to say that, full disclosure, I've known Michelle for a little bit. And have been watching you parent for many years, and watching you has challenged and stretched and grown and improved me as a mom, quite frankly. There are conversations I've had with my children that I would never have had, would never have known, never put the forethought into how to respond to questions that they've had if I hadn't watched you mother through. Appreciate you for being really transparent and showing us what it looks like to do this with such grace.
Yes.
So thank you.
That's so true. And I remember I asked a question about talking to our children about sexuality and sex and relationships. And your feedback was, don't assume their sexuality or gender. And I was like, I totally talk to my daughter about sex and sexuality in a gendered way. I assume that who she is now is who she's always going to be. And so I was missing a huge part of education for her when it came to sex and sexuality, because I was educating her in a heteronormative way when it came to sex.
And I will say that even though I was very inclusive in talking to my older daughter, I have been a better informed conversation partner with my child around sex with my youngest, because there are no assumptions.
Right.
So when you start from that place, it will take you and push you as a parent, because that is a conversation you all need to have on your podcast.
Yes. Oh, no, it's coming. I already have the guest for that. It's coming. I can't tell Nikisha when, though, because Nikisha will skip out. And it's not even about gender. It's just like sex, talking to kids about it, period.
It's pearl clutching.
She wants to hand that over.
I've gotten much better with that. Thank you. I have a tween. I've worked my way up to some things.
You really, really have. And I didn't have to fly in, but I'm still not telling you the date of the show.
That's probably best.
And I will say, I think it's so funny knowing who you are in a group of women, right? To own their sexuality. Right. So that's very different when you're talking about your kids, right?
She totally clutches up. I'm like, but Keish, I know you for like 20 years. What?
And I've been that person for 20 years. This person, I've grown. Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you. And it has been beautiful to see your journey. And I'm so excited that you are pouring into people now, because you definitely have the skill set to do that. So I'm excited.
It's so needed. Thank you. All the love to our guests.
Thank you.
We appreciate you both.
I love the energy you all bring. And I'm so happy that you all are thinking about how to share stories with moms that help them grow, right? Because we're all on a growth journey.
Yeah, we want to talk about liberation in an expansive way, not just in a way that involves race. So
let's free everybody. All right. Now it's time for our one of our favorite segments of the show. It's called Black Mama Say, where we put a little dim back Black Mama spin on current saying, or saying that mamas have been saying forever and a day. But this episode's Black Mama Say is a real twist, because we want to know what Black mamas got to say about the insurrection that took place at the U.S. Capitol.
Do you want to go first, Michelle?
How long we got?
Honey. What's on your mind? What are Black mamas saying?
I will say, I live in a rural community.
I see you, my sister.
White
Come through,
community.
my rural sister.
All of us. We're touching and
touch and agree, rural sister. Touch and agree.
America.
And we all know that there were a lot of white people clutching their pearls, talking about this is not who we are. Even Joe Biden.
After I explicitly put up a Facebook post saying not to say that, he came out and said that. Right. I don't know why the DNC is not checking my posts. I made them public.
I'm like, you all need to study the history of Europe. You need to study the history of fascism. And you also need to study the Civil War in this country.
Yes, the history of this nation. Yes.
They want to think that they're in this together, right? They are so willing to cling to the idea of whiteness and white identity that they don't want to censure. They don't want consequences for white men who stormed the Capitol. And let's be clear.
Crystal, come on, Michelle.
What is so chilling to me is that the constitutional chain of command was in that building.
Isn't that something?
They were in that building. The Pelosi, Pence, Grassley.
All of them, everybody.
White people want to stand for groups of people, but they don't want to stand against their own. And we know that our country was created on the North and the South. In order for them to bind the fraying nation, they had to come to a compromise. And the compromise was, well, we are going to cling to a white controlled power state and base. And we're going to dismantle the rights of newly freed enslaved people and terrorize them for generations.
I appreciate that, Michelle, because I knew that, but I never had anybody quite break it down like that.
Put it in that way.
I
true,
appreciate
though.
that. I appreciate
I've been thinking about a lot because, you know, these myths that you've been told, oh, well, we had to heal the nation because brother was fighting brother. That's right. They will come for you. Your brother will kill you. So this is not about, oh, well, you know, we just have to talk to them and get them to see the light. They will make you the enemy of the state. They came for them. We have Pence, Grassley, and Pelosi, lines of succession, flee the building. Senators, flee the building, fear from their lives. And you don't want them to suffer consequences? No arrests, no bullets, no riot gear, no trucks, no armed cars.
Not even zip ties.
Nothing. One brother with a baton.
One brother with a baton. I was like, this is the capital. This is the seat of government. And you have a limited security around them. But what makes me angry as a Black woman is that my ancestors fought for the expansion of democracy in this country. My ancestors fought for it, and you ain't taking it away. So white folks need to recognize you stand against tyranny. That means you have to denounce white supremacy and identity. You have to do it.
That's a word.
We need to remember who funded Trump. We need to remember that he came into the White House with Steve Bannon. We need to remember all of the white Republicans who are complicit in dismantling democracy. We have to remember that they demonize the CIA, the FBI, like
all of it.
Black people don't root for the FBI, but we're
never.
Like, oh my God.
We was like, what? And we don't even like the FBI and the CIA. We ain't even down for them like that.
Right. And we understand how dangerous that is. You demonize the free press. There are signs, and I'm not willing as a Black woman to allow you, as dysfunctional as this country is and democracy, my ancestors fought to expand democracy in this country, and you ain't taking it away. So that's how I feel.
Thank you, Black Mama Michelle. This is a mighty word. This is a mighty word. Nikisha.
Because I'm pissed.
Nikisha, do you want to go? Or you want to tag me in?
I would just like to say that in October of 2013, Miriam Carey was having a mental health crisis. She was driving in D.C. with her infant in the car, and she went through a barrier near the Capitol. Didn't make it all the way through the barrier before she was descended upon by multiple armed law enforcement who shot her dead in the car.
With her child in the back.
With her child, her infant in the back seat in 2013. You get pulled over for stepping on the grass near the Capitol, walking down the wrong pathway. It is armed. It is secure on any other day of the year. This is no mistake. This is not happenstance. He did not have a rally down the street on happenstance. He had the rally to rile them up and tell them to march to the Capitol. All of this was known in advance. They were talking about it on social media. So this was not a thing that was not expected. Certainly, it was an inside job. I'm calling a thing a thing. So, you can't. This is another thing. I think on one of our very first episodes, I said, you can't tell me some shit I saw in my own two eyes did not happen. Like, we saw it. This was broadcast live from
around
1,000 different
world.
vantage points around the world. Yeah, we're laughing stock.
And let me say, folks is being petty. Folks is being petty. I'm just going to put that out there. I'm not going to call out countries, but folks is being petty. Okay.
They're not wrong. They're not wrong.
And I think they need to show images. They show images of the folks who were the mob and who rioted the building. But I want them to continually show pictures of our senators laying and hiding behind chairs and, in the middle of the floor because they were terrified for their life. They need to show that.
And you know what they were terrified of? That they were about to be part of a mass shooting.
Right?
So we're going to talk about gun control.
Right?
That's all I got to say on it. I'm done.
What I have to say is that I'm just going to twist a little Black woman saying. Black mamas would usually say, stay out of grown folks' business. This is the Black mama saying, right? My saying is, stay out of white folks' business, Black people. Okay?
Hey.
I just want Black people to know that was not about us. That was about them working out their family issues. Stay out of white folks' business, because like Michelle said, they'll end up making you the enemy. That was not about us. Do not make it about you, and stay focused on what we's got to do. Let white folk do what white folk do. And if that did not show us anything else, that should have shown us. And this is what I saw. I looked at that and I said, Black people are a beautiful people. Their fear is that that's how we'll respond, because that's how they respond. We don't respond like that. We strategically build movements rooted in love and healing. And we're so creative in the ways that we hold this country feet to the fire. And I could not help but to think, my God, we are a beautiful people.
I love that. That's what you saw out of that.
That's what I saw out of that. The rest of it to me was that is about them eating their own.
Yeah.
They will burn down something they
love,
something they claim to love.
True.
Right. But they will burn it down because they didn't get their way, because the promise of whiteness is not secured to them. That is their business. And I just want to say, let it flow through us, but don't let it stick to you, because that is white folks' business.
I think that, Crystal, you are so right about, we have always in this country figured out a strategy, right? We have freed ourselves.
Right?
Yes. We have freed ourselves. We have liberated ourselves. And in doing that, we allow for a whole lot of communities of folks that claim this democratic ideal to participate in it. Right?
Yes, exactly.
True.
So
exactly.
You are absolutely right. White folks need to understand that they need to look at what happened and recognize that this is about them. And if they don't figure it out, they're going to be, they're coming after them, right?
They don't figure it out, they're going to eat each other alive. And the one thing that we have proven is that we don't just survive, we thrive and evolve.
We thrive. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think my fear all along was that they would turn their eyes toward us. Like, they've always said they took our opportunities, they took our, you know what I mean? And put the blame upon us. But you're right. And we're not in this.
Here's my offering to those 70 million people who voted for him.
You got an offering?
Yes, I have an offering for them. I really do.
All ears.
I'll tell you what a white man told me. If you don't like it here, you can always leave and go back to where you came from. That's my offering.
I'll accept that offering.
It's my offering. I'm glad that we did Black Mama Say Like This, because I just wanted to document what Black mamas is saying in this moment. And let me tell you something else about the commentary that's on TV right now, just real quick.
What's that?
I feel like we need to make sure we give folks Zoom tutorials, because people had to dig deep in the well, because the news was on 24 hours. When the news is on 24 hours, you got to get different analysts. So they had to go deep in the well to find analysts. Not everybody was Zoom savvy. Folks' audio wasn't right. Folks had some, I don't know what kind of backgrounds. Folks was up in the camera real close. Like you only saw their face in the camera. Folks was yelling, and you didn't have to yell because your voice is already amplified. So I'm just asking that we just take folks through a brief Zoom tutorial. You can tell who had young people in their house. You can tell who had young folks in their house that helped
Not wrong.
With the Zoom call. I'm just saying, Colin Powell's face did not have to be up in the camera like that. Did not have to happen. And it's COVID, so they can't get the lighting and crew to him like the usual setup. So he's reliant on Zoom. Somebody could have took him through a tutorial and said, just back up a little bit. Promise, we'll still catch your face, still catch your audio. I'm just saying, we can just give a one sheet about Zoom before we have these folks on. People do not have to be
Zoom's not going away.
Zoom is not going away.
All right. That's it. I think we ain't got no more.
We ain't got no more.
All right. If you are looking for us, you can find us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Dim Black Mamas.
And don't forget to check out our website, dimblackmamas.com. You can also send us your thoughts about the show, show us some love, and ask some questions at magic@dimblackmamas.com. We got a new email.
Check us out.
magic@dimblackmamas.com. And be sure to listen and subscribe to our sister podcast, Shaping the Shift, hosted by our very own Thea Moye, and also Interculture, hosted by Anya Dula. If you are interested in starting your own podcast and you're a woman of color, check out Women of Color Podcasters Facebook group and follow them on Instagram. If you're a Black mama, you're looking for some love, you're looking for some connection, follow and join Black Moms Connections Facebook group on Facebook and follow them on Instagram at Black Moms Connection. That's all we got. We ain't got some more. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you for having me. I had fun.